Today is the 2nd of August, 2010. We are at the New York State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center in Saratoga Springs, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
Ryan Smithson. I was born on August 30th, 1985 in Denver, Colorado.
And did you attend school in Denver?
I didn't. My family lived out there for a little while, and then most of their family was back here, so we came back when I was 3. So I don't remember anything about Denver. But
And whereabouts did you settle?
we lived in Clifton Park for a little bit, and then we bought a house down in North Greenbush.
Okay.
And then we moved to East Greenbush when I was like 10. So that's where I grew up.
And did you attend school in East Greenbush?
Yep, Columbia High School.
And what year did you graduate?
2003.
Did you go on to college at that point?
I didn't. I enlisted in the reserves. Actually, I was actually still in high school. And then when I graduated, I went to basic training. And I planned on going to college, and then I was deployed about 6 or 9 months after I got out of my job training.
Why did you pick the reserves?
A few reasons. I think the biggest reason is that I did still want to have a civilian life. I joined after 9/11 just out of a duty to serve. I never planned on being in the military up until 9/11. So it was an option for me that allowed me to still have my civilian life. I could still go to school. I could still, I had a serious girlfriend at the time who was actually now my wife. So I didn't want to just leave her for some duty station somewhere. So the reserves gave me that balance.
All right. And where did you go for your basic training?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
And what was that like?
It was all right. It had its moments. You know, the first couple of weeks are the worst, but I think all in all, it was a really interesting experience. I learned a lot about myself. I met a lot of really great people, and I wouldn't take it back for anything.
Was that your first time away from home?
Pretty much. You know, other than overnighters at friends' houses and stuff, it was, yeah.
When you graduated from basic training, did you go on to a specialty school at that point?
Yes, I stayed in Fort Leonard Wood to become an equipment operator, engineer corps.
Now, was that something that you picked, or did the reserves pick that for you?
No, that was something I picked down at MEPS when I enlisted. They gave me a list of, however many jobs.
And why did you settle on heavy equipment?
I think I wanted something, I don't remember what the other offers were, but I think I wanted something that was marketable. Exactly, something I could use outside of the military when I got out.
And how long was that school for?
9 weeks.
And what kind of equipment did you learn on?
Bulldozers, dump trucks, scoop loaders, road graders, pretty much anything that pushes dirt. That's about what we used.
All right. So you completed your secondary schooling, you came back home, and you started drilling with your reserve unit?
Yeah.
And how long after that was it before you were deployed?
I think it was about 6 months I got the call, and then about a month later I actually left, went down to Fort Bragg to meet my unit. My reserve unit didn't deploy. I was cross level 2, a unit out of West Virginia.
Oh. And
I met them in Fort Bragg, and then we deployed.
How did you feel about that, not going with the unit?
Yeah, it was odd. I wasn't really sure how it all worked, and then I got the call. I was actually in my unit administrator's office when he got the call, and he started looking through paperwork, and he said, "Yes, Private Smithson is deployable," to the other guy on the phone, and I just kind of, my heart like skipped a beat a little bit, like, what are you talking about? Because I knew that unit, that was my unit in Kingston, they weren't deploying. They had already deployed in the first wave, and they were back for about a year when I joined up with them. So I knew they weren't deploying for at least a couple of years. And then all of a sudden I just got sort of plucked out, and it was just me, no one else from my unit left.
So you got to the new unit. How were you treated or accepted?
Very well.
Mm-hmm.
It was, yeah, there was not any sort of, what's this weird guy doing here? Because a lot of the people were cross-level, probably half the unit. You know, most
Oh, I
reserve
see.
units aren't at full strength.
Mm-hmm.
And we had people from Texas, from Hawaii, from California, Ohio, all over the place.
So you knew where you were going. How did your family react to the news?
They were, you know, they were upset.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think, a shock for them, but
And how did you feel about going? Did you find it exciting, or the
yeah, I mean,
prospects?
probably all those things. It was, I was anxious, I was
Mhm.
nervous, I was scared, but I was also, yeah, excited. And, I mean, that bond with my fellow soldier, I think, formed right there in Fort Bragg. We really started, you're just training together, you get to know each
Mhm.
other, you get to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you know that you're all in it together, and that
Mhm.
it's really not something anyone wants to do, but we're there, and we
Mhm.
took the oath, and we're going to do it together.
And when did you actually deploy overseas?
We flew to Kuwait in December 2004.
And what type of aircraft did you fly over on? Was it commercial or military?
To Kuwait, we actually did have it was a commercial jet. It was huge. I think our whole battalion went on it, or at least a couple of companies.
Mm-hmm.
But there was like 2 levels and like 12 seats wide all the way through. It was a huge plane.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What was the flight like?
it was long.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped over in Germany to refuel, and then we went to Kuwait, and then got in some buses and went to our camp.
Okay. Once you stepped off that airplane, what was your impression of Kuwait? Was it extremely hot?
No, it was actually pretty cool.
Mhm.
The days were, I think we got off at night, if I remember correctly, and it was probably 40 or 50 degrees, and the days it got up around 70, 80.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't terrible, and it was really dry heat, so it was comfortable, especially when it was around 60, 70 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely wasn't what I thought. You picture the desert, and it's this hot, miserable place with scorpions and
Mm-hmm.
camels and everything else. Which that stuff was around, but it really it was different.
Mhm.
You get there and you're not there as a tourist either. You're there training, and you're on a military post, so it's kind of dismal anyway. It's tents and
Yeah.
trailers at best for the chow hall and stuff like that. So
Now, what was the name of the camp you went to?
that was Camp Virginia. That's where we stayed. It was just a little outpost in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I forgot to say, when we drove through, we actually drove past Kuwait City when we stepped off the plane and went to our camp. And that was a really, really pretty city. They had really neat architecture and stuff. We didn't drive through it, but you could see it
Mm-hmm.
out the window, and the lights and everything. And it seemed very modern, Kuwait did.
And how long were you at the camp?
About 3 weeks.
And where did you go next?
We convoyed up through the middle of Iraq to our final destination, which was Balad. And it took about 3 days.
Any incidents along the way?
No, there wasn't anything. And it was interesting because Kuwait was very modern. It was pro-American. We were welcome there. People gave us thumbs up on the side of the road. And we knew Iraq was a different story. And when we crossed that border and got into Iraq, we're ready for warfare, and we roll through this first village, and there's all these kids lining the road, and they're begging us for food, and most of them didn't have clean clothes on. A lot of them didn't have shoes on. It was like they looked just poor. And it really kind of, I think, was a shock, definitely for me, and I think for a lot of us, that these are just people here,
Yeah.
and they're not our enemy. And it's one of the most difficult things about the war, I think, is that you don't know who your enemy is and
Mhm.
isn't. And it really became human right away for me. We weren't, like I said, you know, we were engineers. You know, we weren't the first wave going through. We weren't looking for the bad guy. We were prepared to do what we had to do to survive, but most of the people I found were just people trying to live their lives.
Now, you were carrying your weapons at that point?
Oh yeah, yeah. We pulled all our own security.
Did you have ammunition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had it in Kuwait. We didn't ride locked and loaded, but we got all that issued to us in Kuwait. And we actually, on the convoy up through Iraq, I actually had, I think, 4 guys in the back of a dump truck. I had a 20-ton dump truck, and I was driving. My platoon sergeant was my passenger, and then there was 4 guys, and we had welded makeshift mounts for their M16s, and I think one had a SAR or an M60 or something that he had mounted in there. So, I mean, we normally, the military wouldn't transport people in the back of dump trucks, but we just had so many people and so much supplies that we just had it loaded with duffel bags, and they were kind of standing out on top and just riding along.
And whereabouts did you end up?
We were outside of Balad in Air Base, actually. It was half Army, half Air Force, called Anaconda, LSA, I believe. Something support area, whatever that stands for.
What were your living conditions like there?
When we first got in, we were in tents. This little tent city, which wasn't great, you know, it's like 10 living cots and living out of duffel bags and everything. And then after the unit left that we were replacing, we actually moved into a hard building. And we had, there was a whole maintenance bay for the vehicles and everything, and we had our motor pool, and we lived right there. And that was actually not bad. We built, they were just big open bays where we were staying. And
were they air conditioned at all?
We had a couple air conditioners, which was nice. And we built up just 2x4s and plywood rooms. We just built these little sections so we could have some privacy, and it wasn't bad. It was a small space, but it was your own. You know, you at least didn't have to live.
Now, were there 2 men to an area, or did you have an area to yourself?
I had my own. It's like closet size, so there was enough for like a bed and some belongings, and then all my gear and everything. It's about all I had room for, but
what about
it was my own.
What about chow?
Chow was not bad on post. It was regular Army chow. They had KBR there with a lot of third country nationals that were cooking our food for us. And the closest one to us was about a quarter-mile away, so we could walk. I think there were 4 on post, and the one on the Air Force side was the best. They actually had plates and silverware.
What about the sand? Was that a problem?
All the time. Yeah.
Got into everything?
Oh yeah, you're constantly cleaning your weapon, constantly. I mean, even after I got home, I was popping what I thought were zits, and it was actually sand, like embedded in my skin. It was just, all the time, especially in the summer. In the winter, it turned into mud because it just rained. Yeah. And it was like this sticky peanut butter mud. It got on everything and in everything, and it was nasty.
Now, what about snakes or scorpions there? Were they
I actually didn't.
around?
I didn't come across any scorpions. We did have a couple camel spiders that tracked into our bay, but no, I didn't have a lot of creeper crawly incidents over there. Again, the base we were on was pretty. It was built in the '80s, I think, and it was pretty well developed. So there was a lot of gravel around. Especially in like the motor pools and stuff where vehicles were parked, because again with the mud and dirt and everything, it was filthy to park them just on the dry land.
Now, how long were you on Anaconda for?
We were there for our whole tour. We were always convoying around, staying at different posts here and there. And our we were headquarters company, and our Alpha Bravo and Charlie were all over Iraq, so we were constantly running to and from their posts. but we were stationed in Iraq, on Anaconda.
Now, were you rocketed or mortared at all on Anaconda?
Yeah, none of them ever got real close. They went for the airfield a lot. That was their big target. Them and the chow halls, just because they knew people were congregated there. But Anaconda was mortared quite a bit. It was probably at least every other day.
Oh, really?
I mean, the mortar alarm would go off, and you'd get into a hard building. When we were in the tents, you had to go into these little mortar bunkers they had set up, which was a pain, especially when you're out doing work and you get interrupted and have to go inside.
Did you have to wear mop gear at all?
We never wore mop gear. We were, a lot of the times we were in body armor and Kevlar and everything, just because the mortar threats.
Okay.
But that was on and off. Some months we wouldn't wear it, and then other months the attacks would get worse, and they'd make us wear all our gear.
Now, what was your work like? You'd have to go out. Were you making roads or?
We did a lot of stuff. Actually, engineering isn't a bad gig in the military because you're busy. Dare I say, overworked, but it was different every day. You know, there was always something to do, and you weren't just sitting in a guard shack for 12 months like some people do when they get deployed. We were, like I said, running convoys to and from all our line companies, and we were just bringing them supplies, bringing them equipment, personnel. We'd take a handful of us, we'd take a squad out and go help Bravo Company do their mission wherever they were, or help Charlie Company or whatever. And their missions, a lot of them were building up bases. At that time, it was you're talking 2005, so the war had been going on for a couple of years, and it was more about building these sustainable posts where we could run operations from.
Now, your job was strictly as equipment operator?
Yes, but being overseas, we did a lot of other stuff. I helped pour concrete. Like I said, just the convoys. I was driving tractor trailers. That really wasn't part of my MOS. But you cross-train in all these different things just because you need people. And you need to get missions done. You do them however you can do them with whatever you got. So there really wasn't an average day. A lot of convoying, like I said, just hauling supplies to and from. We had a couple missions that were a little more exciting than just convoying. Convoying got pretty boring. 9 times out of 10 it was fine. Just long, flat, open desert, and you just drive and park and unload and do it in reverse.
Were you ever under attack or under enemy fire?
We got attacked a handful of times. A couple of those missions that we had that were on our own as headquarters company. One was in Samara. We were doing a mission for this little infantry fob that was there, and they just wanted gravel poured outside of their base because it was just dirt up until then, and they were losing tanks because people were burying mines. So we just poured gravel. It's a lot harder to dig than the gravel, and it's a lot louder if you're trying to do it in the middle of the night. So gravel was a big thing over there, and we ran in and out every day for about 2 weeks from a borrow pit that was about 2 hours north of Samara, and we just had all these dump trucks, huge long convoy, and it was really crappy because you don't want to set a pattern being in a military operation. You want to, especially something like an insurgency where you don't know who's your enemy, you don't know when you're going to get attacked or if you're going to get attacked. You can't run along the same route on a 9 to 5 kind of schedule, but just nature of that mission, and because we had these huge dump trucks and we were driving through these narrow city streets, there was only one route in and out of the city that we could use. And Samara at the time was a real hotbed, and that infantry unit got attacked all the time. And when we were there, they actually set up an attack for us on the road leading out one of the times we were leaving. And luckily for us, the guy who set it up flipped it early and blew himself up. It was supposed to go on our first vehicle, and trap us on that road, and then there were insurgents all up and down that road lined up with AKs. And we were halfway out of the base, and this explosion went off down the road, and we knew that was on our path. So we just kind of froze. We didn't want to get out on that road and see if we could get through. Yeah. So we just stopped, but then the infantry couldn't come out because we were blocking their route. So we had to, we had gun trucks and everything, and we had to lay down our own fire and take care of the people that were on that street. And then we pulled in, all the dump trucks pulled in. I was in the dump truck, I was a passenger in the dump truck at the time. And we all pulled into the base, and our gun trucks laid down fire, and then the infantry tanks came out and did whatever they did for the next hour or two. But that was pretty hairy. We didn't lose anyone, but there were a lot of civilians that got killed. I believe from that first explosion, it was in this crowded marketplace, and there were women and children, and who knows. But later on, the intel they gathered afterward, they told our lieutenant that I think there was about 12 civilians that were killed from that attack. And I don't know how many insurgents, but there were quite a bit from what I could hear from the amount of gunfire that was going on.
Any close calls at all?
Not with me. There was another mission we were doing. We were actually filling ID holes on the side of the road with concrete. And that was about a 2-month-long mission. That was a taxing one. And again, that one we had the freedom to not set a pattern. So we were jumping around all over the route. We were working on this main service route going up the middle of Iraq. And we just go out and pour concrete into these huge craters. And we'd set up a little perimeter. We'd do our thing, and then we'd leave. And we'd go out for 2 days, we'd come in for 3, we'd go out for 1 day, come in for 2, go out for 4 days, come in for 2. So we were constantly changing up the schedule. We were never on the same, we didn't just work right up the road. And we were working with this sister unit, this other engineering unit that we worked with quite a bit. And they were actually ahead of us tearing up the road. There were whole sections of it that were so bad you couldn't even pass, which is obviously really dangerous for patrols because they need to get through there quickly. And they were ripping up these whole sections of road, and then we were coming and just laying whole concrete pads down, rebuilding this road basically. And there was a time they were probably about, I don't know, half a mile ahead of us or so doing their work. And one of the Humvees, one of their gun trucks pulled off to the side into the brush, and there was an ID planted there for him. And it was actually a medic who was in the passenger seat, blew his foot off. And they actually ended up saving it. They medevacked him out to Germany, and they saved his foot. I don't think he returned to duty, but he still has his foot. And we did lose a soldier out of our Bravo company, just a regular old convoy. We were riding up to Mosul where they were stationed, and there were 2 serials in the convoy. We were in the second serial, about 45 minutes ahead of them. Excuse me, we were in the first serial. We were 45 minutes ahead of them. We rolled into camp up there, and they told us that the second serial got hit, and Nuri was his name. He died. Just a passenger's regular old IED on the side of the road. I think that's the biggest threat over there.
Did you have much contact with the civilian population?
Yeah, quite a bit. Not as much as I would have liked to. Being engineers, we were out and about a lot, but our mission wasn't, morale building. We weren't building rapport with the people. We weren't in the same villages. We didn't get to know the population or the local sheiks or anything like that. But we were out working on the roads, and we repaired irrigation ditches for some of the local townspeople. We repaired some farmland. We brought them dirt. We were doing this mission, working on a bridge that went over the Tigris, and we were just widening the road there. And the sheik came out to our lieutenant and said, "Hey, since you guys are working over here bringing dirt to this area anyway, do you mind bringing some dirt for this family?" I guess their farm had a bad year from erosion from the river. And we said, "Yeah, no problem." So we just brought them dump trucks full of dirt and cultivated it for them and everything. You know, they had shovels and wheelbarrows. We had these big engineering equipment, so we could actually do this for them in a relatively short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cool to be able to do stuff like that for the people, because I think that's really where it matters.
Yeah.
Those people are going to decide whether this works or not. It's not going to be up to the military or the politicians.
Mm-hmm. How did you maintain contact with the people back home?
A lot of letters. There was an internet and phone cafe fairly close to us, so we'd walk there, and you got a half hour on the phone, a half hour on the internet.
Now, what about cell phones? Were they banned over there, or they
Yeah, they
were?
were.
They were banned.
Yeah, you couldn't have them. I think some of the higher up brass probably had like satellite phones and stuff, but the regular old GI, we weren't allowed to have them. I don't know if that's still true today, but we did get to use the internet and the phone. And the internet was slow, so you get a half hour, and it was really enough time to write out 1 or 2 emails.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice because I could just put all these people in this address bar that I knew and get them all out, get a letter out to all of them without having to sit down and write each individual person a letter. So I was able to stay in contact with a lot more people than I would have been without the internet.
Now, how long were you over there for?
A year.
And
Okay.
did you get to come home during that period?
Yep, I came home in May for 2 weeks, and it actually fell on my wife and I's anniversary. We got married, I forgot to mention this, we got married before I left for Iraq.
Oh, okay.
We were living together after I got out of AIT, and I got the call, and it was pretty much, it was something we had talked about before that, like, hey, if this happens, because it was obviously a reality, you know, are you going to want to get married? And it was a pretty easy decision. It was, so that was my first order of business before I left, was to marry her.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came home in May, that was actually our anniversary from, like our original anniversary from when we first started dating. And that leave was really surreal. I was not here in a way. You have these 15 days, and it was right in the middle of the tour, which was a good spot to have it because it broke up the tour a little bit, but it was really bizarre to be home.
Mm-hmm. Knowing that you had to go back.
Yeah, and there was a lot of different emotions. I mean, there's like euphoria that you're actually home. It's sort of there's also sort of guilt though, because the platoon is still over there, and I'm not with them. And I was praying that whole time that nothing happened while I was gone, because I wouldn't want them to have to go through something without me there for them. And you know, you're constantly trying not to think about the fact that you're going back, but it's always there, and you are always thinking, you're counting down those days, and 15 days isn't really a whole lot of time. It's better than nothing. But
Now, how did your family and friends treat you when you came back on leave? I mean, did they seem different towards you at all? Or?
yeah, I was probably more different to them than anything. Obviously, they were overjoyed that I was home, but it was, like I said, it was hard because it's in the back of everyone's mind that, yeah, I lived this long, but there's still another 6 months or so to go, which was, I think, hard for them to deal with.
Now, where did you fly out of?
From Iraq?
Yeah.
Actually, we flew out of Anaconda, being that it was an air base. We actually flew right out of there to Kuwait, and then we turned in our gear at Kuwait, and then we flew to, I believe, Ireland. We stopped over for refuel, and then into North Carolina, Fort Bragg, where I deployed from, and then up to Albany.
And how long did that whole process take?
Oh man, I think it was 2 days when all is said and done. But there's an 8-hour time difference, so the days and nights are like almost reversed, it took a day or two just to get used to that.
Now, that travel time That wasn't part of your 15 days?
No, it starts when you land.
At your home of record?
Yes.
Okay. So, when you went back, after 2 weeks or 15 days, was it basically you went to Bragg and then
Yeah, just kind of
caught
reverse.
a flight and
Yep.
landed in, okay. And what was it like when you got back to the unit?
It was actually more of a relief than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Being back home, I thought, oh my God, I don't want to go back. That was constantly in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got back and it was just sort of this familiar life. I had my uniform on again. I was with these people that I had lived with for the past 9 months or 6 months, however long it was. And I kind of felt more at home than I did being at home, which is, I guess, weird, but it felt good to be back. I would have been upset if something happened and I couldn't come back or whatever, to serve out the rest of the tour with those people.
Now, what did you do for entertainment on your off time?
We played cards, usually poker. We spent a month actually in Abu Ghraib prison, doing a mission, just leveling out land for prison space. And
What was that like?
that was cool. That was they got attacked a lot. They got attacked as much, if not more, than Anaconda, but it's such a small post that it was, you felt the ground shake. A lot of times in Anaconda you'd hear the mortar alarm and not even know, because it's miles wide.
Mm-hmm.
But this was, Abu Ghraib I think was about, if I had to guess, maybe 4 or 5 football fields.
Mm-hmm.
Big.
Did you have any?
Not huge.
Did you have any of the prisoners working with you guys or labor?
No, they really kept us separated. They took us on a tour of the post when we first got there. They said they used to take people in to the prisons and walk them through the prison a little bit, but
Yeah.
ever since the whole photo
Mm-hmm.
prison abuse stuff that was going on, anyone who doesn't need to be in contact with the prisoners isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it was mostly MPs, but Abu Ghraib was cool because there was CID there was CIA, FBI, there were Romanian soldiers, British soldiers, obviously a lot of MPs, there were special forces. So you had really the upper echelons of this war kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really cool to just kind of see that and be a part of that. Just eat next to him in the chow hall. That was a cool mission. But anyway, when we were there, they had this pot full of candy in the chow hall, and it was actually one of the best chow halls I've ever been to in the Army. And I think just because it was so small that it wasn't so mass produced like in the other bigger camps. But this one pot of candy they had, it was this disgusting dentist candy you get. It's sugar free and it's horrible. So we'd take handfuls of it and use it for poker chips. There wasn't a lot to do there in our downtime, but we did keep busy. Like I said, we played cards a lot. We played dominoes. We had there was a gym on our post. There was a gym at Abu Ghraib, so we went there and we'd work out. A lot of us did have laptops. We had generators outside of our building, so we could actually watch movies and whatever, play solitaire, whatever you want to do on a computer.
What were your officers and NCOs like?
Hit or miss. There were some that were pretty inept, but a lot that were really great. Our lieutenant, particularly for our platoon, was phenomenal guy. Just textbook definition of an officer.
Mm-hmm.
He was really smart, He was book smart and he was people smart. You know, he knew how to motivate people. He knew how to put things so they were meaningful and understandable. He walked that fine line of being in charge and our buddy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we needed that. You know, a platoon full of 19, 20-year-olds. We need to be able to look up to someone who, not just as a father figure. You know,
Mhm.
they have to. He was sort of like a big brother in a lot of ways. He, you know, he had the option a lot of times of sleeping in an officer's tent, and he wouldn't. He would come and he'd sleep with us. You know, which is something stupid, but it meant a lot
Mm-hmm.
to us as his troops. Just, it was little things like that, you know. He'd walk by and he would stop and just bullshit with us for a little bit, instead of just being the officer and making rules and using NCOs to enforce them. He would just come and hang out sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you eventually went back home at the end of your tour, did the whole unit go back with you?
We went back to Fort Bragg and demobilized, and it was really quick.
Let me ask you, when did you come back home?
I came back at the end of 2005. It was around Thanksgiving time.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us the option, our higher ups, they said, you guys can stay here and demob the way you're supposed to. It's supposed to take however many weeks. And you'll miss Thanksgiving with your families, or we can push you through and work these long days getting all this stuff done and then get you home before Thanksgiving. And of course we said, yeah, we're going to go home for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was about 2 weeks that we did all these briefings, all this paperwork, turned in all this gear, and I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of people. It was our whole battalion. And then we flew out from Fort Bragg and just went our separate ways again. And the unit that was deployed out of West Virginia, like I said, maybe half of them were actually originally with that unit. So they all went back to West Virginia, and when they went to drill, they were still with each other and everything. But I came home to New York, and I was the only one here. I went back to my unit in Kingston, and I wasn't deployed with any of those people. And you know, you have leave for a little while when you first get home.
Yeah.
And then I collected unemployment for a few months before I got a job. And it was really isolating because there was no one around that knew what I went through.
Did you stay in contact with any of the people you served with?
Yep, I still do. Our lieutenant lives down in Pittsburgh, and he actually holds a barbecue every year in the summer. So we go down there, and those of us in the area that can make it down, get down, and that's awesome. And then we, you know, through email and phone calls and stuff, I do keep in touch with a lot of the people.
Were you promoted at all while you were overseas?
I was promoted to specialist right before I left.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think, yeah, my unit in Kingston did it. They said, we're going to push some packets through and get you in,
Mm-hmm.
so you can be deployed as a specialist.
And it must have been pretty difficult for your wife, being a newlywed, to have you overseas like that. It must have been quite a homecoming.
Yeah, I think it was, the whole thing, I think was harder for her than it was for me in a lot of ways, because I had a platoon of people that knew what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have anyone back here.
There wasn't any kind of support unit for...
There was, but it was not effective.
Mm-hmm.
There was the family support group, and they did contact her and stuff, but it was so long distance that there wasn't really anything for her. She's like, what am I going to do with these people? And it was run by the battalion commander's wife, and she was kind of a show stealer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it ran as well as our battalion.
Okay.
Our battalion commander was not the best commander in the world, but So I don't think there was a whole lot for her.
Okay. Now
Certainly, I think if she had been going through something very difficult and needed them, she could have turned to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say it was all bad, but it wasn't the support I don't think that it should have been.
When you came back, you mentioned you were on unemployment for a while, and you eventually found a job. What type of job did you find?
I did landscaping for a little while, just a temporary thing in the spring, and then I worked at a paper mill, the paper mill in Coes. I worked there for a summer, and I did enroll in school as soon as I got home. So that spring semester after I got home, I was in school, I just wasn't working.
Did you use the GI Bill?
Yep, I still use it. I'm still in school part-time. I earned my associate's degree from Hudson Valley in 2007, and I'm going to Empire State College now for my bachelor's.
And what are you getting your bachelor's in?
History.
Okay. Do you plan on being a teacher or?
Yeah. Yep, eventually. Probably high school, I think. But I got to get that degree first, so we'll see.
And you wrote a book.
Yes, I started writing when I was going to Hudson Valley. The first chapter I wrote was actually for a class. I just wrote it for English Comm. And at that time, it was about a year after I got home, I was working childcare. It was a before and after school program, so it worked well with the college schedule. And I hadn't talked about Iraq to anyone. I had really closed myself off. I didn't talk to my wife about it. I didn't talk to my parents, my friends. People would try here and there, but I would change the subject. I'd kind of just find ways to keep from talking about it. And I got this assignment in the English class to write about a time when I saw something destroyed. And I wrote about that ambush in Samara. And it really surprised me how easily it came out, how it really just poured out. It was immediately very therapeutic to just get it off of my chest, to get it out of my head and just put it somewhere else. And then I gave it to my professor, and she read through it, and she said, "Ryan, are you seeking any therapy for what you're going through?" And I said, "I think that writing is my therapy." And she said, "Then keep doing it." So I kept writing and I kept writing. At the end of the semester, she actually has people read one of their essays they wrote for class, and she asked me if I would read that. And at first I said, "No way. No way can I read this in front of people." And I eventually decided to do it. And there was probably 25, 30 other kids in the class, 18, 19 years old.
And how old were you at that point?
21. And I felt 40. I felt so far removed from the other kids at college. I was not on their level. And, which again, I think only added to that isolation. But I did read it. None of them knew I was in the Army at all before this. Like I said, I kept it to myself. And I almost didn't get through the first paragraph. I just started crying. It was so overwhelming to face this thing and to share it with people. And I finally got through it, and one of the kids raised his hand, and he said, "I want you to know you gave me a whole different perspective on what's going on in Iraq." And that's when I knew I needed to tell this story. As painful as it was to go through it again and to face it, it's extremely vital that I get it out and that I tell people about it. And that really motivated me to keep writing. And that professor, actually, after I was out of her class, she would go through these essays I wrote and correct them just like I handed them in for a grade. And eventually I had all these stories, and I got a couple of them published here and there in different journals and websites. And then we sat down and put them together into a manuscript and tried to sell them. And after about 6 months of trying to find an agent, I found one. And then she went to the publishing companies and found a home for it at HarperCollins. It was actually a young adult editor, young adult. She does young adult books, and my agent thought it could really work, being that I was 19 when I was in Iraq, and it's worked out very well for it. And now, for the past year and a half since it's been released, I've been going out and talking to high school students, college students. I go to bookstores, libraries, pretty much anywhere that I get invited to and I can find time for.
Now, have you traveled out of the area promoting your book?
Harper sent me to Chicago last year. I went there to talk to a couple schools. One actually put it into their English curriculum, so I talked to them, and then a few others in the area. And then San Antonio, I went to a library conference. Texas Library Association does this conference every year, and authors and booksellers and publicists and all these people come in for this thing, and that was fun. Heather actually my wife got to go out with me this year for that, so we spent some time in San Antonio.
Wow.
A little vacation.
If you don't mind me asking, do you have any idea how many copies of your book has been sold?
They just told me, I think altogether about 15,000 or so. That was last year's numbers. So, I don't know if that's from the release date. The release date was April 2009. So I don't know. She said last year, so I don't know if that was from April to April or all of 2009. I'm not sure, but it is doing very well locally. There's a few independent bookstores in the area that are really pushing it and getting it out there.
Great.
And all the local schools I've been to, probably over a dozen local high schools, just to talk to the kids and do book signings and stuff.
Now, do you think that at some point you'll maybe write another book, or you think?
Trying, on top of school and work and everything else I got going on. I do find time for writing. And I've had a few ideas that I've kind of gone into a little bit, worked on them, and then sort of drove back a little bit. But I got one that I'm really trying to work on now. Almost, I don't want to say done, but the first draft is almost complete. And I'm going to send that to my editor. It's writing is a tough gig, because it's nothing that's sustainable. It's nothing that's ever guaranteed. Even a really great book might do really well and then just fall off, or something that it could take 10 years and then finally it takes off. So you just don't know how it's going to work as a career. But I do have the foot in the door. I think that's the hardest part for most writers.
Sure.
So I'm definitely ahead of the game there.
Okay. Did you join any veterans organizations at all?
I'm a part of a couple online community groups, veterans groups. There's Vets for Vets, which is local, and then there's IAVA, which is Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, I believe. And it's a non-profit, and I actually met the guy who started it. He's an infantry officer who served in, I think, the initial wave, 2003, 2004, somewhere in there. And he started this thing because, again, I think he felt the same sort of isolation coming home. And he realized that there needs to be that veterans need to form these little communities and reach out to each other.
Have you seen any of the movies that are out there on the current conflict?
Yeah, I've seen a few. Taking Chance is one that I've seen about a colonel it's a true story about a colonel in Germany who never went into Iraq and feels kind of guilty. He could have volunteered to go, but he didn't. And he finds that he is looking through the KIA list,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. And he finds this one kid that was killed from his hometown somewhere in the Midwest, and he offers to escort the body back to his family. And that was really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That was really well done. It was Kevin Bacon played the colonel, and it was very emotional, and you see sort of his, it's almost like survivor's guilt that he's dealing with, even though he wasn't there with
Mm-hmm.
that soldier. And just to see him travel through and meet all these people along the way, the sort of advice he gets from them, and that was a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Home of the Brave is another one about more coming home. There's a little bit in Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
this unit in Iraq in the beginning, and then it's mostly about coming home and the transition home and the difficulties, and I related to that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was harder than the combat, just coming home and dealing with all these things. And I think that portrayed that very well. And then Hurt Locker I saw, which, again, that was mostly in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't so much about coming home, a little bit. But I think that did a really good job of the psychology of war and the war as a drug kind of theory. So all the ones that I've seen have been
Mm-hmm.
pretty good.
You kind of already alluded to this, but how do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Yeah, I couldn't ever not see my life without it,
Mm-hmm.
looking back. And I really wouldn't want to. You know, as difficult as it was, I think I'm much more mature than I
Mhm.
would have been otherwise. I have a bigger perspective on things than I think most 24-year-olds do.
Mm-hmm.
My relationship with my wife is a lot stronger because of everything we've been through. And it was hard. Those first couple of years after I was home were really difficult. And we were close to calling it quits
Mm-hmm.
more than once. But we got through it, and that foundation that we have now is so strong. And we learned so much about each other. And, you know, we've built this life together. And I couldn't see how our relationship would be without the military. I guess,
Okay.
it's sort of, the military, it's a tough thing, especially the reserves, because it's, during this war, because it's this sort of looming cloud.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side of it is that it has made us much stronger as a couple. We've gotten through a lot more than most young couples have been through and will get through. So we can face anything now.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that even just personally, the fact that I've gotten over basic training and Iraq and everything else, I've learned, I've made mistakes and I've had regrets, but it's all in all a very rewarding experience.
Mm-hmm.
And learned a lot of great lessons that I'll carry forever.
And you're still in the reserves, but contemplating getting out.
Yeah. As of now, I got a baby on the way. Heather's
Mhm.
9 months pregnant, so she's ready to go any day now. But my contract is up in December
Mm-hmm.
of this year, so I don't know how I'm going to view things when I actually get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
With a new baby, I may not want to
Sure.
re-enlist right away. But again, it's always something I could do in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you so much for your interview.
Thank you.
Okay, Ryan, let's see the cover of your book. If you'll hold that right there, I can zoom in on it. Okay. Excellent. And you're donating a copy of that to the Military Museum?
Yeah.
Are there any photographs inside the book?
Yeah, there is, actually.
Yeah, if you can turn to that section, we can zoom in on a few of them.
Sure.
Okay, that's perfect right there. That's you and your wife?
Yep, that was on our wedding night. We went to Buca di Beppo. We threw our wedding together in about 2 weeks, so it was just a small little gathering. But we had about 30 friends and family that could come. We just went to the Italian restaurant and had a nice little dinner.
Okay, and the bottom photograph is?
That's Specialist Rhodes and I were on the convoy going up through Iraq, and that was one of our stops. I think it was Camp Scania, yeah, which I think that's in Iraq, pretty sure.
Okay.
That's the first stop in Iraq.
All right.
And there's a mortar bunker when we were living in the tents there. That's where we had to stay during the mortar attacks. And you can see we're in our PTs, so I think we were woken up there in the morning.
Oh, okay.
So we rolled out of bed, threw on our Kevlars, and jumped in the mortar bunker.
And what's that second photograph? That's one of the...
This is Specialist Green and a little boy. This is at the borrow pit for that mission in Samara. We were taking this gravel from this area.
Oh, okay.
He lived near there or something, and he would show up and kind of hang out with us. And there's over on the Air Force side, they had murals painted on the mortar barriers around the chow hall.
Uh-huh.
And Batman, Superman, and then me.
Okay.
That's me. I believe that's in Abu Ghraib. Yeah, I was driving a dump truck doing our mission down there.
Okay.
That is me with a little bird on my finger that he used to come down from the palm trees that were in our little courtyard outside of our building.
Oh,
And he would just kind of hang out with us. It was really weird. He'd sit right on your finger, and no other birds did that. He was the only
wow.
one. So that was kind of cool. There's the lieutenant. That was, like I said, phenomenal guy.
Uh-huh.
Someone I'll look up to for the rest of my life. And then this last one is just a bunch of us from the platoon. This was a post outside of the creek. I forget what we were doing there, some mission. I think our Charlie company was doing a mission. We were helping them out.
Okay. And there's a photograph on the back of the
Oh, yeah.
book,
That's
and that's you?
it's my high school photo.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you have any other photographs with you?
Just this one. Just a service picture here.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, that was right before we left. That was down at Fort Bragg.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again for your interview.
You're welcome. Thank you.